So hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Winter 19 for Testers. My name is Hetty Borman-Weston, and I'm Head of Marketing here at Provar. Presenting with me today, I have Richard Clark and Geraint Waters, and I'll be passing over to them in a minute. So today, as you know, we're going to be talking about some of the highlights of Salesforce's Winter 19 release and Provar's support for those. We'll also talk about some of Provar's other new features that are coming up in Provar 1.9.3, and we'll talk a little bit about the future as well, so what's coming up soon on our roadmap. The webinar will last about 40 to 45 minutes, so we'll try to give you a bit of your hour back. There will be some time for questions at the end though, so if you'd like to ask a question at any point during the webinar, you can do that by typing it out into the questions box, and I'll make sure that these get picked up with the presenters at the end of the session. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, so I'll send the video around tomorrow in case you'd like to watch it again or share it with anybody who couldn't make it today. And one last thing from me, I just wanted to make you aware of what we're up to at Dreamforce next week. It's going to be quite a busy week for Provar, so do have a look at our website to find out everything that we've got going on. Particularly interesting for us is that we're doing 2 speaking sessions this year. So we have one quick 20-minute introduction to Provar and another breakout session on test automation for admins. So do get booked into those sessions if that's of interest to you. You can learn more on our website at provartesting.com/Dreamforce. And on that page, you'll also find out more about if you want to visit us at our stands where they're located, or if you'd like to book in for a meeting with one of our experts, you can also find that on that page. Okay, that's it from me. So I'll hand over to Richard for the presentation.
Thank you, Hetty. Hi, everyone. Just before I start, just some basic stuff. If you've got any questions, please put them in the GoToMeeting question box on the side panel. Hetty will collate them and we'll tackle them all at the end, any that come in. So please put your questions in there as you think of them. No questions too silly, don't worry, we've seen it all. So I'm going to talk to you about Winter 19. I'm going to talk to you about Winter 19, not from the perspective of Salesforce and the rah-rah, look at these core features in setup, look at this, look at Einstein, look at Analytics Cloud. Well, I'm going to talk to you about the things that 90% of our customers do day in, day out, which is mainly around the core CRM functions, the thing that most people embed in their business processes and want their test automation around. So I'm very much going to focus on the things that will affect you. Now I'm going to focus, because we've got people both who are existing customers and people who are potential customers of Provar on the call today. So I'm going to list some items out that are changed in Winter 19. Provar customers in the whole, in most cases, you can sit back and relax and enjoy the ride until we get to Geraint's part of the new features. But there are a couple of gotchas if you've got any page objects to be aware of. But if you have any custom frameworks you're using, any custom Selenium frameworks or anything else, it's worth taking note of the changes that I mentioned. Let's get started. So firstly, I want to talk about release cycles. So we're in the middle of the Winter 19 sandbox window at the moment that started on the 8th of September. Some people have asked us to explain how we get our releases. We get our releases the same as every other Salesforce partner, and we got it about 4 weeks ago, the 16th of August, which gives us a very small window. And when we get a release, what's called a sandbox, a pre-release org, the access we get, we don't know what's in that release when we get access. So we're basically given that as a suck it and see, and we run all our regression tests to find out if anything's broken in that release for us. Some of those things are false positives, so we go back to Salesforce and say, hey, this seems to have changed. Other things, we decide that actually this seems to be a new feature they've introduced, and when the release notes come out about a week or 10 days later, we get confirmation that the change was intentional. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today are in the release notes from Salesforce. Some of the things are not in the release notes, but are in the sandbox preview that we're currently in. If we have to make any further changes, we'll make those changes in our 194 release before the production org, but we'll see as typically Salesforce make changes on a weekly basis, and we're in sync with those. Looking further ahead, the spring release is currently penciled in for the 8th of December for Sandbox Preview. The date you're more interested in is the 5th of January next year, so you get to enjoy your Christmas and New Year festivities, hopefully. In the meantime, our guys at Provar are going to be working hard at delivering new functionality into Provar outside of Salesforce release windows, and we'll talk about some of those features today and what's on the roadmap. If you want to know when Salesforce are planning their releases, please do take a look at the Salesforce website. URL at the bottom, the maintenance windows where you can get access to their calendar. And for example, you can see the summer 19 release is currently penciled in for the 4th of May, although the pre-release has not yet been scheduled. Okay, let's get started. First thing I want to talk to you about in Winter 19 is the display density. So within the Lightning experience, there's a new setting, which is under the user's picture, or the default picture here. I've got Astro. And if you right click on there, you get this context menu. And in there, you can now pick your display density between comfy and compact. Now that's a end user setting. Okay, there is a way that the admins can set a default, but the values that they set can be overridden by any end user. You can't force people to only use compact or force people to only use comfy. The good news is this is a simple CSS change. So it's really just in the context of the CSS, the same CSS classes are being used. So Provar tests and most test automation frameworks will work perfectly fine, regardless of whether you used comfy or compact. It shouldn't have any impact on most of your test cases. Now, there are some possible impacts. The first one is one that it should have an impact on. If you use Provar's read assert test step, and you're testing the attributes and you're testing the attribute in view, then obviously because compact delivers 30% more fields on a page than comfy, you will probably get some different results of that, depending where your field's located that you're testing. So it's one to bear in mind. If you get different results, do check whether you're in comfy or compact mode, especially if it changes to a positive and you expect it to be a negative. Equally, if you've got any page objects for testing your own Lightning components, and those Lightning components are changed by your development team to respect the display density, then expect that to potentially impact your page objects, depending what locators you've used. If you used our by aura or by visual force or by name or by label, you should be fine. But if you've used XPath locators, depending on the changes your developers make, that could make an impact. Let's have a look at this in practice. What I'm going to use for the purpose of today, I'm actually using Provar's test builder to run my demonstration. This is going to do most of the clicking for me, and I'll dive in places and show you some of the new features working in line as such. So firstly, with display density, it's available up here in the profile, and I can switch between comfy and I can switch between compact. I'm already in compact here. I'm going to run my test onto the next breakpoint. And so it's going to drive the opportunity home screen. It's going to drive this list view. I'm picking the first row in that list view, and I'm going to click on the opportunity name. There we go. It's moved it for me. So because I'm in compact mode, we can see here the field labels are smaller text than they were in standard Lightning experience in the comfy layout. The tab labels are actually larger text, so easier to see. And the field labels appear to the side of the fields in most cases. Now, this is a view screen, and we have observed that on things like address details on the account and the contact pages, Salesforce have kept the labels at the top above the fields. So whether they're going to change that or not in the next couple of weeks, I don't know. But there are some things that have been changing over the last couple of weeks in the sandbox previews. Some of those things have been changing, so just be aware of that. And the other thing to be aware of that at the moment, this change, the display density, is only affecting details or record details components in both view and edit. So on the right hand side here, I have a related record detail, and you see here it's still displaying it with the labels at the top. So this is nothing to do with Provar. This is what Salesforce are doing at the moment. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these things change over the coming weeks. So that's the view. Let's move on to edit mode, and we'll see basically the same thing again. In edit mode, we've got much more of a classic look and feel, but we've still kept our form pop up. Our fields are labels to the side. So if you've got end users, it's more familiar to them if they've come from Classic to Lightning. So it can help migration from Classic to Lightning. A few more things to note. In terms of, I've already mentioned the org default, and the end user can override it, but it does also affect both standard and console applications. We affect both of those, Lightning, standard Lightning, and standard and then console Lightning applications. I've mentioned about affecting view and edit, and that's all so far. If you have custom components, maybe you've written your own Lightning components, and you're using the Lightning design system or using the Lightning base components, then there is some developer guidance which you should take a screenshot of and pass through to your development team, which will make them aware of how they should be respecting that user preference for the display density. If they've used the correct design system, there's some information about when that is also going to start respecting those settings automatically. So your developers might not need to make any changes whatsoever, but they do need to read that article and make an assessment of what impact it will have. I've already talked about the related record we saw. That account summary is not affected at the moment, and also not affected are mobile or communities. And neither of those, even if you're a Lightning community, there's no such thing as the display density. That has no impact on even mobile or communities. If you want to know more about the display density features from Salesforce, the Salesforce bit.ly link at the bottom here will give you more information about the changes they've made and the impacts it has. So moving on to the next item, it's multi-select pick list. So this is one of those undocumented features. I'm still quite skeptical this is going to make it through to the production cut, but let's see. So in summer 18, we had in Lightning the ability to multi-select by sort of control clicking on multiple fields or multiple values in a single list. And actually in Winter 19, mobile works the same way. This is still the case with mobile. But with Winter 19 desktop, what you see is we've reverted to more of a classic look and feel, where the values on the left are available to be pushed into the selection on the right-hand side. The good news is, if you're a Provar customer, we've always been dealing with this using our Salesforce multi-select and Salesforce multi-deselect actions. So those interaction types will give you automatically working across summer or winter. So your test is going to work unchanged. There's nothing to do with your test case. You may see your test evidence change, but that's all you should see. And again, those items work in classic Lightning and mobile without having to make any changes. Let's see that quickly in action. So using my same opportunity I've got open here in edit mode, I've put a rule on that condition that my stage, when I change that to close won or close lost, the win-loss reasons are dependent on that, and I can pick some values. So let's just play that one out for a second. So it's going to locate the stage pick list field. It's going to change the value to closed won for me. Let's be positive about it. It's already going to select feature as one of the pick list items. See, that's execute on the right hand side. And now I've just reached my pause. And I just want to show you what that looks like. So I can pick any of those items. I can right click on that item, add it to my test case. There's nothing new here whatsoever. And it automatically suggests SF multi-select, or you can do the deselect on a different value, and I can add that to my test case. There's nothing that special about that that we haven't seen before. Okay, let's move on. So my third demo is around list view search. Now, I've been using Salesforce for over 11 years now. And in that time, this has been one of the features that I found most frustrating that's been missing all the ways, even before what we call Classic now, the release before that. It's been very frustrating. Now, this is a great feature for end users, and it's one that people will definitely use to find the right record quicker and faster. So you may previously in your test cases as well have test cases that are scanning across multiple pages of a list view to find the record that you want to click on. And this is a great way to now improve your test cases. By adding this search in, you can reduce the number of records and hence reduce the amount of time for Selenium to locate and paginate through all those records to find the one you really want to click on. So I think it's a really good feature to include in your test cases. You don't have to include it, but I think it's going to really add some value. Another key point is once you set the value in that field, do remember to check the tab off or press enter field checkbox in Provar to make sure that the focus changes and therefore the search works. So let's see that one happen in action. So here I am on the leads list view. We can see here, this is our new field. So I'm just going to proceed with a mapping I've already created. So I've put the word Smith in there and we see the list is shortened to just 3 entries. So I'm now going to add that to my test case. And we see here, we've got this new item, an existing field, a list search. We never had this before the 193 release. And then either use the tab off or the press enter as needed to do your locator on that one. Okay, let's move back. The next demo I've got is about changing owners on a list. So we can see here, I've got a list view. We've always had a change owner button in Salesforce, but that change owner is normally on a single record. We can now change owner on a list on certain objects, such as cases and leads, where it's very frequent that you may want to reassign some records to another user. So again, I see end users using this quite often. Now, the impact for QA is that your existing Salesforce customizations are probably not expecting to have multiple updates on leads and cases and other objects, custom objects, and changing ownership of them. So if you've got Apex code, if you've got flows, if you've got process builder processes, those things may not be what we call bulkified correctly. So it's a good item where you can add some value by including a new test case into your test coverage to make sure you include this one. Let's have a look at that working in practice. So all we're going to do is we're going to check some of these fields. I'm going to add this to my test case. So we've located that record, just going to check that box. So again, nothing really new here. We're just seeing the standard Provar that we've always done before. And again, I'll just do a second field, add that to my test case, add and do that one. And I could have picked the second row rather than by label, would have been a smarter test case. And then I'm just going to map a button, the new button up here, change owner. Provar automatically sees as part of the metadata that we're inquiring, change owner. And we'll map that one, and even the form behind it. So here we have a form, and on that form, I'm going to put in a select a non-admin user and reassign those to that user, add that to my test case. And then I would do the submit button. Okay, so if you want more information about this feature from Salesforce, again, there's a bit.ly link at the bottom of the page. If you take a screenshot, have a look on there and you can find more details about where these features are available. Last point I want to make here is about Lightning Console. Now, Salesforce in Winter 19 have made Lightning Console consistent with Classic Console, which is a good thing. And how they've made it consistent is in the Summer 18 release and before in Lightning. When I have what we call a workspace tab or a primary tab, and I click that little menu to select a different object or a different page underneath it, it used to open in a new workspace tab. So you used to get lots and lots of tabs opening up, going across. And that was very different. That was the opposite of the way Classic Console worked. Over on the right-hand side, we have Winter 19. And in this case, selecting an item just changes the current tab. The other change they've made is around the app launcher. So if we see this dot matrix over here, if I select an item in there and I pick a tab that's not part of the list in here, in Winter 19, it will now open as a new tab. In Summer 18, it opens as an existing one. Again, great news for Provar customers. You don't have to worry about this. We're handling this change for you. We detect whether you're in Summer 18 or whether you're in Winter 19, and we'll respond accordingly to whichever sandbox you're running in. So the same test running in development, running in SIT, running in UAT, could all be on different versions of Salesforce, and your same test case will run across each of those. If you want more information about that feature, again, there's a bit.ly link at the bottom of the page for Salesforce's feature on that. Finally, I want to cover just some miscellaneous features. These are other undocumented Winter 19 changes we detected. The Provar customers can sit back on this one. So if you're using any custom frameworks, be aware that Salesforce have changed the markup and IDs for things like the subject field on the new task page. So be aware of that. That may impact you. The related list quick links Lightning component. If you're using that one, again, there's been changes to that, some fundamental changes which may affect your test cases if you've got your own custom framework. And similarly, rich text area fields have changed as well, so do be aware of those. The last item there, opportunity stage field, is really just a sort of heads up. That used to always default to a null value, and now it defaults to the first value in the list. So previously you had to complete a value in there to create a test. The plus side for us is that when we're doing demonstrations, we no longer have to map that field every time. It defaults to prospecting or whatever our first stage is. So if you have any custom page object locators or custom APIs you've developed for any of the things above, do be aware of those. Right, now I'm going to hand over to Geraint, and Geraint's going to talk to us about the Provar 193 release and some additional enhancements on top of those that I've covered already.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, everyone. So yeah, like Richard said, I'm just going to walk through, with the 193 release, yes, we're supporting winter 19, but on top of that, there are always going to be some enhancements. So I think it's important that we do always mention this in our webinars, so keep you up to date on things. The first one we're going to go through is that when we're sort of choosing order lines, but from quote, this is now fully supported from metadata, whereas we were always doing this from opportunity. This is what we would have needed to do previously as a page object for the quote. So if you have gone down this road, then of course you don't have to necessarily replace what you've done. But the good news is that if you do, obviously we maintain that going forward for you after all the different releases. So I'm going to go now flip over into my screen, and what we're going to look at, as we can see, we've got Provar on the left-hand side, test build on the right. I'm just going to use this as an excuse, as a little refresher actually as well. Main reason being is I feel passionate about obviously putting a good structure in place for our tests and using the combination of API and UI tests in order to sort of solve testing problems, not just having long running UI tests. So in order to do that, what you can see at the moment, I've already started my test. It's connected to Salesforce, and I've created myself a variable. So those of you who aren't Provar users on the call today, I don't want to go so fast that you're not going to follow, but what you can see is I've created a set value. In that set value, I've created a unique ID. That unique ID is test ZBLK. You can see that in test runner, and ultimately now I've got what I need. Now, what I really want to do is create myself an opportunity, and I don't want to do it via the browser. So what I'm going to do is clone an existing one, and that's just drag and drop, and we'll do a create. And what we can see is we get in a single step now an opportunity. It doesn't mean to say I can't override things, so I can choose whichever stage I like. But importantly, what I want to do is control spacebar here and grab my opportunity name, which I've just created. So this is going to make sure it's got a unique name so I can find it. It's not reusing existing data. So again, if we go back to Test Builder, I just need to go next now to run that. And what we can see, that's now executed. Now, of course, I need to refresh the screen here. And what we should be able to do is locate that now in our list. So I've got my opportunities. We come down, and what we can see is we've now got ZBLK, which I think was the name of our guy. So that's, we can see that's our variable that we created on the fly. Now, at this point, when we're navigating, if we do it via the API, I want to carry on in the UI, I've got a few choices. I could just basically use our where clause functionality. And so what you can see now in Test Builder is it will tell me that I've got the ability to locate my row intelligently. And you can see I could choose the name, and this could be a variable. And then we go into the record that way. Alternatively, you can just go directly to it. Provar does quite a lot of the navigation for you. So what I'm able to do is go directly into the opportunity manually. Then what I'm trying to do is create a quote. So let's go and create that quote, and I'll show you how to go back and make that navigation much smarter. So here you can see it's telling it's the opportunity home screen. We've got the new quote button all coming from metadata, and we're going to click it, which you could override, and then we'll just do add and do. Now, while that's writing that down into my test, the way I make that dynamic is, you see on our sort of screen here, we've got a hard-coded ID of the record we're currently on. But of course, in future, we don't want it to be this record. We want it to be the record we just created in our API step. So what I'm going to choose to do is replace this, Control Spacebar, with my opportunity ID that automatically gets captured from my API step. So now, when this runs, it's only going to work on this. And this always navigate option is going to directly take me there. So it's already reducing quite a lot of clicks, basically, in our test case. So let's go back. We're now on our new quote. I don't really care what the quote name is for this demo. I'm just going to go ahead and put anything in there. And then I'm going to choose add and do and hit save. And then once I'm there, I'm going to go through, and what this does actually takes me back to opportunity. When you create a new quote, I need to actually navigate into the quote as another step. So I'm just going to create this exactly the same way as I personally would if I was sort of doing this test case. So let's not skip any steps. What we can see now is we've got our new quote. Again, what we're able to do is choose, if we had 10 quotes in here, I would need the where clause functionality. I would need to say, well, let's look it up. I don't know the quote number in advance, so I'd probably use the quote name, make sure it's unique. But because we know there's only going to be one, given that we created this opportunity from scratch, I could also just use row number 1. So let's go and do that. That's easy enough, pretty simple. It will take me into the first quote. And then from here is where we're going to be stepping into sort of the new mappings that we've got in this release. And this is where we're able to choose the order lines a little bit smarter. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we're going to be interested in the add products button. So let's right click on that, add to test case. And then what we'll see is we can choose add and do. This screen here where we've got, we've only actually got 3 rows in our products for this demo, but I'm pretty sure lots of other implementation got an awful lot more. So again, what's really important here is we understand how to distinguish between the different rows. So there's an awful lot of sort of tables in this demo. So if I right click on here and choose add to test case, here we're into our new functionality. You can see again, we need to find the right row first. And I think a pretty good way is probably the name of the product we're interested in. You'd hope there's no duplicates. If there are, you could use a combination of these other columns. And I'm just going to choose check. Again, when we're using sort of things which you can check, uncheck, a toggle is obviously just going to flick it the other way, depending on what's already chosen. If we go ahead and add and do, we've added that particular product into our test. Let's go ahead and add another one. And then we can go and choose which quantity we want for this. So that's all selected nicely. We go to our next button and we'll go ahead and add some quantities. So I'm going to click into that. Let's put in our values. Let's go for 2, shall we? And then we'll go for a couple of floating licenses as well. And that is by and large the flow. And like I say, this is much more maintainable this way round, and we'll hit save. Great. Now I would finish this test off just to show you my thought process of, great, it pressed save, but really, did that actually happen? I could have been checking at the API level, of course, if I wanted to, but also I could just check the related list if I wanted to. So right click, add to test case. What we see in Test Builder this time is the ability to override click to be read assert, and I could just be checking that if I match by any of the criteria up here, is the expected value what I expect it to be? It may be more importantly, I'd probably use quantity, of course. Did the right quantity come through, etc. So that's what I would finish this test off as a read assert, and maybe add a screenshot for your evidence. So that's a slightly elongated flow of how to demonstrate the quote and order lines, but again, it was actually a little refresher for people as well. I think the other interesting feature which I quite liked when I saw it for the first time is at the moment when you are using Test Builder, you tend to see all the sort of variables, functions, which are really common. Obviously, you might even see the Excel where we're doing data-driven testing, and that's fine when you haven't run the test. But actually, once you're running it, or once you have run it, it's great to see really what it was resolved to. So you can see the opportunity name in this case is resolved to some unique ID, which we do a lot of, into a real date, where you can see it's actually done the formula for us. And finally, obviously this is hard coded on the left hand side, so it's only going to show you the same value. But the key is we get a lot more feedback when I think you see these values. So this will be when you upgrade to this version. You'll also see that in sort of the test runner. You'll see that in your PDF docs and also BDD. And this is an example of it sort of running in your PDF doc where you've got the timings as you're expecting, but you're seeing now the resolved value. So again, quite a nice little aesthetic thing, but I think useful. The next thing we're going to quickly look at is quick action. So again, Lightning is broad. Lightning has lots of different parts to it. And quick actions is an interesting thing. So in my mind, let's go back to our screen here. What you can see is that we've got, I think, quick actions in a number of places. So if I look at the opportunity, you could go over to activity here, create a new task, and we'll notice that Provar has been supporting quick actions here from metadata for quite some time, and this will all map nicely. So you can see we've got new task, quick actions, all the different fields are going to come here, future releases, Salesforce releases, that's all well maintained. Now, you also might see them over here in different sections, but the one I really want to talk about is there's quick actions also available at the top menu bar here. And that didn't come in with Winter 19, but I'm starting to see it quite a lot in different customer implementations now. So what we want to do is just quickly show you that this would have mapped as a page object in the past, and now it's mapping as you'd expect it to via metadata. So this is the new case button that's going to take us into the overlay for adding the new case. And then from here, what we'll see is all of these fields are the ones that are now in a position to sort of be mapped the way we would want them to be, in a very reliable way, with the intelligent mappings against metadata, where we can see it's now linking to the quick action new case screen. So that's fine. We add that into our test case, and then we'll hit save, and happy days, they're the things. So whenever you're doing that in your org now, you will see a difference. So that's really what I wanted to say about quick actions. Let's have a quick look at my next point. The next point is really around finallys. Now, again, I'd imagine some people on the call, which are Provar users, would have used finally, and some of you won't. Now, what is a finally? Finally is something which is always going to run, basically. So you might have the concept of a teardown. That is at a test case level. So that would be, if you run a test, once it's completed, I'll run the teardown at the end of the whole batch. In the case of a finally, it's a test case specific thing where if I run my steps, even if I fail, I will run the finally at the end. And the change here is the finally now can exist all over the place. It used to be just a top level part of your test. Now it can be embedded. So let's have a quick look at that in practice. I think the first thing to note is if people are familiar with the skip on error field, what that actually dictates is whether, if I hit an error, what do I do? Now, skip basically translates as hit my error, get out of that test, go to the next test if you're running on an overnight batch. From my perspective, if you wanted it to just carry on anyway, you can choose continue, and by test case, it would hit your error and just do the next step regardless. Inherit really refers to when you're using callable tests. So if we chose and skip, then basically what's going to, with the finally, it will stop. It won't do any more steps. Let's say this step here fails, but it will jump down to your finallys at that point. So let's just drag one in, for example. So first and foremost, I'm going to drag in a group step, and I'm just going to call that my call finally. Group steps are obviously great for documentation and allowing people to put comments in throughout their tests. You could also use BDD steps, which you'll find on our test APIs as well. Finally, now I would typically give it a comment of something like delete my opportunity, because what I want to do, just an example, is one of the things you may want to do is a custom clear up of your data, which you might add to a finally. Now, just so you're aware, there is a smart way of doing clear ups, and in there you might see the auto cleanup option and the connection step. But you can always just go ahead and add your own. Now, the way I'd want to do this particular clear up, I wouldn't want to do it via the UI. What I'm going to do is actually drag in again from my org browser, and what you can see is we can get a delete step here. Now, interestingly, that delete step has got a hard-coded ID because it's mirrored the one I dragged. In our case, we don't want to delete that one. We want to delete the opportunity ID we created as part of our test, of course. So this is where we would go over to Test Builder now. We've added our API steps. We can always just say right-click Step 2. That's going to move my test to wherever I feel like it. Or we can add breakpoints, as you can see. But if we choose a Step 2, it moves us here. And then what I can do is just choose the next in order to delete my opportunity at this stage. So that's really quite interactive. I hope you'd agree with regards to API, UI steps, how to do clear up, how to do things sensibly. So that's the finally that I wanted to quickly discuss and introduce, those who don't know it. The other final things, this is my last slide, is really about some other items. We've got the ability to customize tabs in Salesforce. So that's really where you can go in and change it from the standard Salesforce names. If you do that, that's all supported in Provar in order to do that testing. We've also been building out support for different languages. So that's Italian, Dutch, German, Portuguese, and Spanish for our mappings. If you have another language, just please get in touch. We're not intending on just sort of supporting all 27, I think, languages supported in Salesforce. But the reality is we're very happy to talk to you about it if you have an additional one. And then final point there is that we get all the goodness out of metadata. It's extremely important part of Provar, and as such, we're always looking for smarter ways to use the APIs provided to us by Salesforce to make it quicker, to make it more robust. So there's also some tweaks in there that are good improvements to the product. So at this stage, I'm going to say thanks to everyone, and I'm going to hand back to Richard, who's going to be walking through the Provar roadmap with you.
Thank you very much, Geraint. So I'm just going to tackle some short-term roadmap items. If you want to know what's the bigger picture, then please see last month's webinar about 1.9, where I went into more detail about short, medium, and long term. So the first thing in Provar 1.9.4, which is our currently in beta, so it's actually with our testers ourselves at the moment, we've added support for lightning action overrides, and one or two customers have actually got access to this already working with us. So this is a feature that was requested by you, our customers, that we included in this release. And how that works is the administrator of a Salesforce org has the ability to override a standard page and change the behavior both for classic, for lightning, and for mobile. And what we've done is make sure that if that's been overridden with a lightning component, instead of assuming that we're going to see, say, the standard account page or opportunity page, or account page in this case, we're going to see the component, and you use the correct page object, lightning page object, or by actions for that component. So we already know about that, which makes your life a lot easier. We've also added support for Lightning Path. This has actually been a very big change. Although this feature came out for Salesforce some time ago, it's been extended to multiple objects and it's been enhanced several times by Salesforce. It's now reached the point of stability now where we're able to adopt it, and we've adopted it completely within the 1.9.4 release. And that includes the navigation of these items here. And this is basically a pick list field from the object that's selected for showing within the path that's configurable within the Lightning App Builder. So I can click on any of those items and map that in Provar. I can interact with the Mark as Current Stage button as well. I can interact with any icons for scrolling through that bar as well when it's relevant. I can interact here where you see it's very small, but apologies, any fields that can be edited within that stage of the path. I can interact with those with Provar. And if you've got any guidance for success, again, you can reassert that text to validate the correct information maybe after deployment is shown. So we've been very comprehensive with that feature. Please check it out. Please give us any feedback on its use. So lastly, sorry, one thing is runtime optimization. So in the 1.9.3 release, we added a lot of cool functionality. Some customers have reported some areas where they think we could add some optimizations. So we've taken that on board and we're intending to deliver that in the 1.9.4 release coming up. In 1.9.5, it's still in planning and development, but some of these things have already been started. We've already got all their designs in place. So we're going to give you a new XPath builder. Now we're going to deliver this over several releases. 1.9.5 will be the first release where you'll start to see some of the changes coming through. So we're going to give you the ability to have a build your XPath more dynamically. Not just using text, but being able to pick from classes, names, and positions, and help you construct XPaths within Provar. We're also going to give you the ability to override that and say, do you know what? I don't want to use a builder. I'm really good at XPath already. I just want to type it in or copy and paste from my favorite utility and put that in as well. So you're going to be able to do that. You've had to do that before from the Provar desktop. Now you'll be able to do it within Test Builder. And then we're going to take this functionality and we're going to roll it out across things like by label, by CSS, and table mapping as well in subsequent releases. Another cool feature we're planning for next year is an autocomplete function. So when you're typing in that free type box, as you put a slash or a dot or brackets, etc., it's going to suggest some items that you can put next. So we're going to help you write those as well, so you don't have to use any third-party utilities or browser plugins to build your XPaths. I'm also pleased to say within our 1.9.6 release, it will be generally available, but we've already started work on it, is our secrets file password encryption. So this is going to give you the ability to control the encryption key that's used, so that only you will be able to decode your secrets file that's holding any encrypted passwords for any of the connection objects that you're using. So that's been a feature that a number of customers have asked for. We've started working on it, but it's going to be a couple of releases to iterate through before we're ready to make it GA. One last reminder about Dreamforce. So please do take a look on our website. It'd be great to meet some of you guys, especially those that are in this time zone. We always look forward to meeting customers and meeting you face to face and putting someone human behind a name or behind an email. So please do come and see us. And if you're available and you have a full pass, please seek some of our sessions as well in both the admin theatre, which is in the Trailhead zone, and in the main expo as well. Come and see us. Some final information, if you want to know about our latest release notes for 193, please go to the Provar website and go to the release notes section. It's always available, freely available to all people. If you want to know more detail about our roadmap, you can also log into our portal on our website and you can get to our roadmap there if you're an existing customer. Equally, if you're an existing customer, you can always get to the latest Provar download, be it our Linux build, our Mac build, or Windows 30 or 64-bit builds. So you can get to all of those from the latest release link there. And finally, if you are new to Provar and you're interested and want to know more, we've gone quite fast through some of the features today. So if you want a slower pace video about how to use Provar and some of its features, then please see the bit.ly link at the bottom around Provar Essentials webinar we did a couple of months ago, which will give you a much more wider idea of some of the features we have. So just to finish off then, if you've typed any questions in as we've gone, Hetty, do we have any questions to answer at this stage?
Thanks a lot, Richard. Yes, we do have a few questions that have come in already, but we probably have time for a few more. So if you'd still like to ask a question and you haven't yet, then please don't be shy. Go ahead and type it out into the questions box and we'll pick it up. But for now, though, the first question that we've had is, it says, there's obviously a lot of features in Salesforce Winter 19 release that you haven't mentioned today in this webinar. How did you choose the features to highlight today, and does Provar support the other features?
Okay,
Richard,
so
do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I alluded to this at the start actually when I talked about release cycles. So within when we get our pre-release, the first thing we do is run our regression pack on it. And that will create a number of, say, flags, and they're either things that have changed or things that are false positives. Once we've sort of established those and decided which of those we're working on, well, if it breaks, we're going to work on them, obviously. We also look through the release notes that arrive about a week later, and we pick out, although two things. We pick out, again, the things that we think are going to have an impact on our users, the things that are most commonly used. And we also identify anything else that we think could be useful in the future. Now, anything on that last part will basically go on our backlog, our product backlog. And that can be something that's prioritized through your account representatives, any features you want to use. By and large, in Winter 19, I think there's very few features that we haven't already tackled. But in other releases, if they're much bigger releases, you may find that we put more things on the backlog. But we'll always focus on making sure Provar works first on the release. And then second to that, we'll worry about adding those new features that Salesforce have added to make it easier for you to use smart locators on them or page objects.
Fantastic, thanks, Richard. The next question says, if I upgrade to Provar 1.9.3, can I still use it to test a Summer 18 sandbox or org?
Yeah, so that's, again, it's very, very common. So when Sandbox is upgraded, they're not all necessarily upgraded at the same time. It depends on the pod you're on, and there's some Sandbox preview instructions that Salesforce issue for that. So Provar is aware of the Salesforce release that you're running against. So the same test will work on Summer 18 as Winter 19 if it was written for Summer 18. Obviously, if I write a test that's specific to Winter 19, such as the list view search, that's not going to work on a Summer 18 org, nor should it. But if you've written your tests on the older version release, they will run exactly the same on the Winter 19 release, and you can switch between them.
That's great. Thank you, Richard. So I think that's all the questions we've had come in, so we can end the webinar here. If you'd like to stay informed about any of our future webinars, then do sign up for our webinar email alerts. There's a link on screen now that you can use to do that. It's bit.ly/Provar updates, capital P, capital U. So on that page, you can opt in to just receive webinar info, or you can also sign up for any other content you're interested in, like our quarterly newsletter. Finally, I'll be sending around a recording of this session tomorrow in case you'd like to watch it again or forward it to any colleagues. And so it just leaves me to say thank you again to our presenters today, Geraint and Richard, and thank you to all of you for attending. Thank you. Bye for now.